I never imagined I'd be standing here, in front of all of you, telling this story. My hands are still shaking even now, 23 years later. My name is Elena Voss, Dr. Elena Voss, if we're being formal, but back then, I was just Elena, a 32-year-old emergency room physician who thought she knew everything about life and death. I was wrong. Death has a way of rewriting every rule you thought was carved in stone. Let me take you back to the summer of 2003. My husband, Marcus, and I had chartered a 60-foot ketch named the Siren Song for a 2-week sailing trip down the Atlantic coast with 3 other couples. We were all doctors or surgeons, old friends from residency days. We told ourselves it was a celebration of surviving another brutal year in the OR. In truth, it was an escape. The kind of escape that makes you forget how fragile everything really is. The first 9 days were perfect. Azure water, laughter echoing across the deck, wine at sunset. Marcus would wrap his arms around me from behind while I steered, whispering stupid jokes about how even the ocean obeyed my commands. I laughed every time. I believed, in that naive way people do when life is easy, that we were invincible. On the 10th night, the sky turned black without warning. We were 200 miles off the coast of North Carolina, well beyond the shipping lanes. The forecast had said light squalls. What hit us was a rogue storm that meteorologists later called a once-in-a-century monster. The wind screamed like something alive. Waves taller than our mast slammed the hull sideways. I remember the exact sound the first wave made when it broke over the bow, metal groaning, glass shattering, the wet slap of water flooding the cabin.
Elena.
Life jackets. Marcus shouted over the roar. His face was already bleeding from a cut above his eye. We scrambled. The 6 of us, Marcus and me, our best friends Raj and Priya, Tom and Claire, and the newlyweds David and Sophie, managed to get into the inflatable life raft just before the Siren Song rolled and sank like a stone. We had 1 emergency beacon, 2 flares, a small first aid kit, 6 liters of water, and 4 protein bars. Nothing else. The raft was designed for 8. It felt like a coffin once the storm calmed and left us drifting under a merciless sun. Day 1 after the sinking, we rationed the water to 2 sips each every 6 hours. We told stories to keep spirits up. Raj, the cardiologist, did his terrible impressions of hospital administrators. Sophie, only 28 and 3 months pregnant, kept touching her belly and smiling bravely. I watched Marcus's eyes and saw the same calculation I was making in my head. How long can we last? Day 3. The water was gone. The protein bars were a memory. Hunger became a living thing inside us, gnawing at our stomachs, making our hands tremble. Sophie vomited seawater she had tried to drink. Her face was gray. Priya, an anesthesiologist, kept checking her pulse and whispering, "She's dehydrating fast." Day 5, Sophie slipped into a fever. She lay curled at the bottom of the raft like a broken doll, whispering to the baby she would never meet. The rest of us sat in silence, the sun baking our skin raw. I kept glancing at the horizon, willing a ship to appear. None came. That night, under a sky so clear the stars looked close enough to touch, Marcus pulled me aside. His voice was hoarse. "Elena, we have to talk about it." I knew what it was. I had been thinking the same thing for hours, hating myself for it. "We can't just wait," he said. "Sophie isn't going to make it. The baby's already gone. If we use what's left of her, the rest of us might survive long enough for rescue."
I stared at him.
The man I had loved for 12 years suddenly looked like a stranger. "You're talking about cannibalism, Marcus." "I'm talking about not dying for nothing." The word hung between us like a scalpel. I was a doctor. I had held dying patients' hands and told them it was all right to let go. But this was different. This was choosing who became the means to someone else's survival. Raj overheard. Soon all 6 of us, well, 5 conscious ones, were arguing in whispers so Sophie wouldn't wake. Tom, the trauma surgeon, sided with Marcus immediately. "Consequentialism 101, he said bitterly. 5 lives versus 1 that's already ending. It's math. Priya started crying. "It's not math. It's murder," Claire whispered. What if rescue comes tomorrow? We'd have killed her for nothing. David just rocked back and forth, holding her hand, saying nothing. I was the tiebreaker. They all looked at me, because I was the one who had taken the Hippocratic Oath most recently in our minds. First, do no harm. I felt the raft rocking gently, the salt crusting my lips, the endless black waters stretching forever. My stomach cramped so hard, I almost doubled over. And in that moment, a terrible clarity settled over me. I said, we draw lots. Tomorrow at dawn. If Sophie passes naturally tonight, we use her. If not, the shortest straw decides. No one argued. Even David only nodded once, tears cutting tracks through the salt on his cheeks. The night that followed was the longest of my life. I lay awake listening to Sophie's shallow breathing. Every rattle in her chest made my heart lurch. I kept replaying every ethics lecture I'd ever attended in medical school. The trolley problem, the fat man on the bridge, the organ donor who is still alive. I had always chosen the 5. Always. Numbers mattered. The consequences mattered. But now the one had a name. A face. A pregnancy bump still visible under her soaked shirt. And she was lying 3 feet from me. Around 3 in the morning, Sophie's breathing changed. It became a wet, gurgling sound. David started sobbing quietly. I crawled over, pressed 2 fingers to her neck. The pulse was there, but faint and irregular. I whispered to the others, she's going. We waited. No one spoke. The only sounds were the slap of water against the raft and David's broken breathing. At 4:47 a.m., Sophie died. I closed her eyes. My hands were steady, doctor hands, but inside I was screaming. The next part is the part one still can't say, without my voice cracking. We had no knife. Only a small folding multi-tool with a 3-inch blade that Tom carried. We drew straws anyway because we needed to decide who would perform the first cut. The shortest straw was David's. He looked at it, then at his dead wife, and said, I can't. Marcus took the tool from him. I'll do it. I stopped him.
No.
I'm the surgeon. I know how to be quick. I know how to be respectful. They all stared at me. I think that was the moment they realized I had already crossed the line in my own mind. I was choosing the greater good.
I was choosing to save the 5.
I won't describe the details. Not because I'm sparing you, but because some images should never be spoken aloud if the listener still wants to sleep at night. I will only say that I worked like the ER doctor. I was efficient, clinical, detached. I told myself it was no different from an autopsy. I told myself it was the only way the rest of us would see our children again. I told myself 1,000 lies while the sun rose and turned the ocean the color of blood. We ate in silence. No one looked at anyone else. The taste was, I can't. I still can't. Days blurred. We rationed what we had taken. The protein kept us alive, but it also kept the horror alive. David stopped speaking entirely. He just stared at the horizon with eyes that had already died. On the morning of day 12, we spotted a container ship. We fired our last flare.
They saw it.
They came. Rescue. The German freighter Nordstern picked us up. The crew wrapped us in blankets, gave us saline drips, and asked no questions at first. But they saw the evidence in the raft. They saw what was left of Sophie. When we reached port in Norfolk, the FBI and Coast Guard were waiting. We were separated, interrogated, charged with desecration of a corpse, but the real charge, the one that would follow us for years, was the unspoken accusation of murder. The trial was a media circus. Doctors turned cannibals screamed the headlines. Our lawyers argued necessity. The prosecution argued that we had crossed a moral line no emergency could justify. I took the stand. I told the jury exactly what I am telling you now. I told them about the trolley car I had steered with my own hands. I told them about the fat man I had pushed. I told them that for 12 days I had lived inside the worst philosophical thought experiment ever devised, except it wasn't hypothetical. It had a name. It had a face. It had a future that would never happen. The jury acquitted us on all charges.
Necessity, they said.
But the court of public opinion never acquitted us. David killed himself 6 months later. Raj lost his medical license and drank himself to death in a motel outside Atlanta. Priya moved back to India and never spoke to any of us again. Tom and Claire divorced. Marcus and I stayed together, but the man who came home from that raft was not the same man I married. He flinches when I touch him in the dark. And me? I still practice medicine. I still save lives every single day. But every time I lose a patient, a small voice in the back of my head whispers, "You could have saved 5." I have never told this story in public before, but today I am telling it because someone has to. Because the world wants simple answers. Push the fat man or don't. Turn the trolley or don't.
Eat or die.
But when you're the one holding the knife, when the sun is beating down and your husband is looking at you with eyes that beg you to be the monster who keeps him alive, there are no simple answers. There is only the choice. And the choice never leaves you.